Okay, moving swiftly right along. Our next speaker in the program is Russel Hlongwane. Russel is a co-founder of Onexus Music Business, a music business and education company that teaches emerging musicians about the ever-changing music industry. I know Russel doesn't have a musical instrument with him, but if he did, I'm so tempted to ask the DJ to pump up music because the audience are Fakugezi. But Russel will be doing a presentation about Ifu Elimnyama, and that is Zulu translation for The Dark Cloud, which is a transmedia project that spans the discipline of film, performance, and text. I don't want to spoil Russell's presentation, so I'll let Russell come to the stage. And as Russell makes his way to the stage, please give Russell a warm round of applause. Thank you for tweeting. I am on Twitter. I'm seeing your tweets. Keep them coming. Welcome, Russell.
Thank you. Good morning to you all. I'm not going to repeat my name. So there are two parts, I guess, to the presentation. The first is a short film from which I'm kind of reading a text or a basis of the film. It's also, I think, on show in one of the exhibition rooms. So I'm going to ask, while the gents set up the screen, I'm going to ask the sound desk to kindly play the film.
Sengihambe amakhulu ezinkulungwane nezigidi zamalanga emkhathini phakathi kwemhlaba ngidlula odalagwini lezinkanyezi amagumbini amaningi omkhathi angajwayelekile ngiphuma kwelemimoya ephansi kwempucuzeko yezinga eliphezulu kakhulu kwelemincwi eyafudukela esigabeni sesine la emkhathini ngibuyelela emhlabeni woyise nonina bezukulwane sabansundu ukuzofakaza ngenkululeko yenkanyamba eyabithenwe amandla unomphelo ocishe beyingunaphakade ewo yaduka endleleni yayo emva kokuthi umkhombandlela wayo udukelene nomkhondo ngomoya eyabe iwulandela yamanse emthumeni phakathi kwesibhakabhaka nomkhathi emva kokushabalala kolwazi lwempucuzeko yabansundu efinela lithukuzile ligcine yonke lemqingo hawo yabe izikhwabaniseka okulandela lapho eside isimo sesomiso esadlula ezinye empilweni yemlando yempilo yake yaqoshwa ifukazi leli azange sakwazi ukufukamela lethisa amanzi emvula noma ukuxhumanisa udlelwano ngomoya lutho nje ukunyakaza okwenza kunciphe amathemba kwabaphila ngaphansi kwalo ifu leli thola ukuthi phakathi nendawo kwale mpica badala inkinankina kwabe kucashe obala umhwebi ogama lakhe linguQhomqayise umndeni ayezalwa kuwo kungowasebukhosini obukhulu okwakuyiwo kanye owabe uphathiswe amandla okugcina izihluthulelo zalo lonke ulwazi lwentuthuko ngempucuzeko eyabe kufanelwe iphilwe kwagcina kutholakele ukuthi usezakhele umcebo namandla ngenxanye ngokukhwabanisa ulwazi aselwebile kuyifukazi leli maqede aligxishe kumaseva amaseva ndini lawa ayewakhiqiza yena ezimbonini zohwebo. Kunemiyalezo ethola impilo nokufezeka ngezenzo ephuma kweliphambili emkhathini wesigaba sesine ezikweni lolwazi ngobungodi bokuhlambulula amafu. Yona nje idinga ukuxhumana nesigodlo esikhulu sakwamaphungubwe nayo yonke ingabadikazi yohlanga olwempisholo.
Thank you. Too kind, too kind. So the work is titled Ife Elimnyama, loosely translated to the dark cloud. And in a nutshell, the film takes Zulu cosmology, folklore, and systems of transcendence and places them within a digital framework as a way to think of the internet, to think of digital culture from an ontological point of view. And so Fakugezi enabled a residency that I undertook in Ghana, in Accra, to show the work, but also to further develop it. And then I kind of came here a week ago to further think through the idea and kind of the fundamentals of the values of this work. And so the kind of the position or the points that I find myself now is exploring this idea of a digital ontology through an indigenous point of view or indigenous position. And what does that mean? I'm not quite sure yet, but it seems that this idea of a digital ontology is not a new kind of area of inquiry, at least in the so-called West. But of course, one is trying to explore and kind of invigorate this from my own position. And here in this kind of presentation, I'm presenting a kind of cloud phenomena that I'm kind of thinking through as a way to extend this. And I'm using Inkanyamba, which is it's called a cryptic snake. And the reason is because its existence has not been substantiated, nor is there evidence of this snake. But it's kind of very much alive in the imagination of the people. And so I'm from Msinga, Greytown. There are 2 or 3 sites across KwaZulu-Natal where the snake is said to kind of occupy and exist. The one is Howick Falls. There's evidence that I'll get to. And there's some kind of sightings in Msinga of this. And so I'm going to use these notes as a way to guide my presentation. And so I'll constantly do this because the projector is slightly out. So what you have here is a really faint and vague image of a mountain that's not too far from my family home, Msinga in Greytown. In fact, this image is taken right at the entrance of the family home. And at the peak of this mountain is a lake, a super, super big and deep lake, which is occupied by Inganyamba. And so I've dismissed this story, I've dismissed this narrative because it's kind of been with us, it's been in the community or in the village for at least two decades now. But I got really, really curious as I started to kind of think about the cloud and think about digital culture and indigeneity. And I thought this might be an interesting site to explore and think through some of these things. So the name of the mountain is called Indanyana. And it's said that whoever reaches the peak or the top of that mountain never returns. Yeah. And so, in conversation with a cousin of mine who was raised Msinga, I asked him about this, and he said, "This is my Facebook chats with him." No. Is this no? It doesn't work. No. Yeah, there you are. So you can't read this because the light is too bright from this side, but basically, according to him, about 6 or 7 years ago, around 2012, 2013 was the most recent encounter, most recent case of Inganyamba. And I kind of took on then to kind of explore this a bit further. And he's quite skeptical of the existence or the presence of Inganyamba. But then there was a headline that I came across, Wisodezwe, which is the second biggest daily in South Africa. I think it's the biggest kind of Zulu and English. And this is the headline. It reads, Ishiye unqukuphalo lodwa inkanyamba emunyu. So this is somewhere around the Eastern Cape where this family that you see here, the roof has kind of been taken off, and this is because the Inganyamba moves with the cloud, with the dark cloud. It moves with the whirlwind, in fact. And so because of this, it's never been seen, it cannot be seen, despite the evidence that exists of Inganyamba. But the after effects are definitely felt. And so when it kind of moves, it's said to move during summer. It moves once a year from one lake to the other, for one of 2 reasons. One is to mate. The other is when it gives birth, it leaves its offspring in that lake and it kind of moves to another one. And I guess what's important to highlight here is that Inganyamba is of untold length. It's extremely big. It's extremely powerful, and it's part of the reason why it's kind of it's very difficult to talk about it in a very factual way. The most popular case of Inganyamba is at the Howick Falls. There are 3 cases which are documented. The first was in 1962 by a game ranger at the Howick Falls by the surname of Fakugezi. It was cited again in 1974 and 1981. And fortunately, this time around, there's a picture. So what you have at the bottom of the picture around here is a head of one of the tourists, and the kind of black figure that you see somewhat in the middle going all the way to the top is said to be kind of vague silhouettes, a vague capture of Inganyamba. And this has kind of spurred a number of investigations. And so in Greytown, for example, I remember as a young boy, there were geologists that had been excavating the mountain that I showed earlier on, and trying to kind of evaluate if there is indeed a snake that occupies and exists there. There were some things that were discovered, but nothing factual enough or evidence that there is a snake that occupies this space. Of course, Inganyamba has made its way into the popular imagination, and what you see here is an interesting painting of Inganyamba. So in the construction of what I call an indigenous digital ontology, I think Inganyamba, for me, it triangulates three very important and kind of central pillars to this work of mine. One is indigeneity. Two is the idea of the cloud culture or digital culture. And three, it's cosmology. And the critical connection here is the cloud, of course. As I've mentioned, that Inganyamba is an incredibly rare site, if one can ever see it. It is said to move with the whirlwind in the form of a cloud, as can be seen from the Isolezwe headline. And very much like in the context of this conference, the proverbial cloud is of particular importance in Zulu folklore. The cloud can be understood to represent fertility from a Zulu position. The cloud is connection to Nomkhubulwane, who is the goddess of fertility, the goddess of rain, if you will. Nomkhubulwane is also said to be Umvelengqange's consort. Umvelengqange is the creator in Zulu folklore. And what I'm trying to do here is to introduce a transcendental dimension to the cloud as we know it. And so if digital culture talks of the cloud as a kind of repository or a connection to interdimensionality, then here too we can think of Inganyamba, the cloud, Nomkhubulwane, Umvelengqange, the creator, as a kind of way of moving and ascending this idea of the cloud. So the film, to go back, is set in 1220. It's set in the ruins of the great Mapungubwe. And so if Elimnyama fabricates a moment of the great decimation of the great metropolis village of Mapungubwe, the survivors of this people decide that in order to preserve the black race, a group of them ought to migrate to the fourth dimension. Upon departing, the metropolis village anonymously agree to store the history of the black civilization in the cloud. What followed the decimation was an extended brutal drought. Not only did the cloud not release water, it suddenly corrupted. With Nomkhubulwane's back to the people of Mapungubwe, it also meant disconnecting from the history of the black civilization since the Big Bang. It meant a disconnection to the God dimension, if you will. Atop of this corrupted, infertile cloud was Inganyamba. Itself was migrating and suddenly was caught up in this meltdown of the digital infrastructure of its time. The Inganyamba, as a result, was locked in liminality for eons due to the cloud's immobility. There is a key, however, to undo all of this digital entanglement. I will ask the sound desk to play the sound clip, please, and just make sure that you pick up from 23:28. Timestamp. And as we wait for this to load, my grandmother was quite central and important in constructing this narrative and the research. And what you will hear is my grandmother retelling a case of Umungwe. So in the film, there's this one character who's kind of moving around across space-time. And this is an encounter that my grandmother tells of her best friend at the time who had encountered Umungwe.
Eba ngithi ungiphathe naye nangithi manje pho yindaba ulele ulimele. Athi makoti kubo hayi akadlenga kulimala nje kuphela akukhulumeki akakwazi ukukhuluma. Hayi xoxela indawo zayo. Siyabona utholwe lesifuku lesi esimungu sihamba sehla senyukana. Baningi abasibonayo. Masikala ungakhulumi kwakho uyashwashwatha.
Uba
Yena sala. Manje uyabeza bona bathini naye uthi uyazama ubatshela ukuthi kwenzeleni. Uyalinganisa nangesandla uyasayina. Azathatha ipeni abhale phansi. Manje zona babone ekhaya ukuthi ube nankingane abhale phansi ngepeni abhale bafunda.
ukhona wena la?
Nami bangitshengisa ke sengifikile ngathi kwasengidlulile eselele nje. Hayi xoxa indaba. Uyasho la iphepheni tayi. Izolo ngibone lo baba lo ufaka isudu emnyama. Wanginothisa ukuthi afuna uphinda ngibonana isikhathi sakhe lesikhathi.
And so, in a nutshell, my grandmother is telling a case of a friend of hers, at least 4 decades ago. Umongwe is said to be a spirit's form, a spirit being, that it's your spirit before it turns into a ghost after death, right? And stories of Imingwe kind of fade out around late 90s, early 2000s. But I found this particularly interesting. So my mother and my grandmother had rich stories about Imingwe. And Imingwe is kind of identified and it's characterized by 2 or 3 kind of fundamental, consistent traits. The one is it releases sparks. Sparks are seen from the mouth and from the nose. It is incredibly tall. It's a tall figure. And it's very mischievous. It kind of moves through electric charge. In fact, it is said that umungu transports through an electric charge, right? And so umungu in the narrative, in the story, is seen as this group that migrated to the 4th dimension. And over time, they've been looking at the black civilization as it tries to recover from this great decimation. But of course, we caught up in all kinds of destructive, non-productive encounters with each other. And so they feel that they're not quite ready yet to engage with us. Yeah. And then to go back to the narrative, 4 generations down of this family that was given custodianship of the cloud. Will you let me know of the time? 1 minute? Oh my gosh. This is interesting. And so 4 generations down, the grandson of this family is looking to privatize the cloud that hosts the ontological history of the black civilization. And his plan is to inject the cloud with the virus, migrates the contents, the history of the black civilization into a service that his digital empire would manufacture. And it's upon the threats of this privatization, the commercialization of the black history, does Imingwe, which is the case that my grandmother had told, return to the earth to task an elite team of technologists to move across to Nairobi to engage with geeks out in Nairobi around digital culture and a digital infrastructure that will connect Mapungubwe. Then, of course, that will connect the people of Mapungubwe to the great cloud. The Nganyamba will eventually settle kind of where it was meant to go. But it also means that black folk will then have connection to their God self and the great creator, or Nomkhubulwane, and above her is the of all-knowing creator, Umveli Nqangi. So that's kind of the narrative in a nutshell, and this is the point that I'm at, is using the narrative, is using this story and these tales and this folklores, and some of these interesting kind of ideas that confront a scientific understanding of knowledge production to understand and maybe perhaps explore and arrive at a ontological digital culture from an indigenous point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, Thank you so much, Russell. That was so interesting. I, for one, have been told these stories by my grandmother as well, growing up in KZN. So it's quite interesting to see how you're interpreting this and marrying it with the digital migration.